Warning: these social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre.
Well, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here. Another edition of In Case You Missed It news here on this now, looks to be the 18th day of October. We're cooking right along here, getting deep into the fall season here, getting a little chilly finally. More seasonable temperatures, at least in this part of the old country here. Hopefully you're doing well. And got a lot to get to here this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the old marketplace here. We're going to talk a little bit about the housing market, coal industry, flooding in China, things that impact food production, all sorts of stuff here on the broadcast this morning. So, that being said, let's get into it. First up, we got futures slide on renewed China slowdown, rate hike fears. Says U.S. equity futures and world shares drifted lower following poor Chinese macro data, which saw the country's GDP slide to a weaker than expected 4.9%. And as surging energy prices and inflation reinforced bets that central banks will be forced to react to rising inflation and hike rates faster than expected. Calls by China's President Xi Jinping on Friday to make progress on a long awaited property tax to help reduce wealth gaps also soured the mood. With West Texas Intermediate crude rising to a 7-year high and Brent back over $85, investors remain concerned that living costs will be driven higher. The economic recovery also remains uneven, with China's gross domestic product slowing more than expected in the third quarter, increasing aversion to riskier assets. The dollar rose against all of its group of 10 peers as concerns about an acceleration in inflation damped risk appetite, while Bitcoin traded above 61,000 and just shy of an all-time high ahead of the launch of the ProShares Bitcoin ETF on Tuesday. An MSCI gauge of global stocks was down 0.1% by 808 GMT as losses in Asia and a weak opening in Europe erased part of the gain seen last week on a strong start to the earnings season. U.S. stock futures were also lower, with S&P E-minis last down 0.2%, while Dow and Nasdaq E-minis were both down 0.3%. So there we see that graphically. China's gross domestic product grew 4.9% in the July to September quarter from a year earlier, if you can believe those numbers, its weakest pace since the third quarter of 2020. The world's second largest economy is grappling with power shortages, supply bottlenecks, sporadic COVID 19 outbreaks, and debt problems in its property sector. Additionally, industrial output and fixed investment also missed expectations, while retail sales beat modestly. Not even the latest attempt by China to ease Evergrande contagion fears is enough to offset worries about China's economy. On Sunday, PBOC Governor Yi Gang said authorities can contain risks posed to the Chinese economy and financial system from the struggles of China's Evergrande group, because of course he will say that. So anyway, aside from that, oil extended its recent gain, Brent crude still on its upward march. And of course, by the way, yeah, cronyism is still alive and well. U.S. share buyback authorization announcements through October 8th, and it's at a new record of $884 billion for corporations to buy back stocks because, well, when you have all this money laying around from lack of sales and everything else and free money per the Fed printing, what better thing to do than to shovel it back into the corporation so that it trickles down into the CEOs and everybody else? I mean, that's the name of the game, right? Obviously, if you're not selling products. So, in any case, let's move along from that and get into some of the highlights. It says, in any case, Virgin Galactic Holdings shares fell 3% U.S. pre-market, extending losses from Friday that came after the firm pushed back the start of commercial flights further into next year after rescheduling a test flight. Here are some of the other notable U.S. pre-movers today. Baidu shares erased earlier losses and climbed as much as 4.3% in Hong Kong as China debates rules to make hundreds of millions of articles on Tencent's WeChat messaging app available via search engines like Baidu's. Crypto-related stocks in action as Bitcoin leaps as much as 5.3% and is just shy of a fresh 6-month high. Riot Blockchain, Marathon Digital, and Coinbase are all up. Tesla shares rise 0.2% in pre-market trading Monday, poised for a 50% rally from a March 8th low, ahead of its third quarter results on Wednesday. Dynavax shares rise as much as 10% in U.S. pre-trading hours after the biopharmaceutical company announced that Valneva reported the trial of inactivated adjuvanted COVID-19 vaccine candidate VLA-2001 met its co-primary endpoints. So yet another drug or jab or whatever the heck this is for the old COVID business. Disney drops in pre-market trading after Barclays downgrades to equal weight as the company faces a tough task to get to its long-term streaming subscription guidance. NetApp slips 2.2% in pre-market trading after Goldman Sachs analyst Rod Hall cut the recommendation on NetApp Inc. to sell from neutral. Some others here, Playtech shares rise as much as 59% in London after the British gambling software developer agreed to be bought by Australia's Aristocrat for 3.7 billion. Valneva SE shares rise as much as 42% as its experimental COVID-19 vaccine elicited better immunity than AstraZeneca's PLC shot in a clinical trial that will pave the way for regulatory submissions. Shares of hydraulics manufacturer Concentric rise as much as 14%, the most since April 2020 after Danske Bank upgraded the stock to buy from hold, calling the company a strong performer in a difficult market. THG shares jump as much as 12%, most since May 11th, after founder and CEO Matthew Moulding confirmed his intention to cancel his special share rights. The removal of the special share points to the e-commerce company's willingness to engage on shareholder concerns, according to Jefferies. Rational AG shares rise as much as 6.1%, the most since August 5th, after the German kitchen machinery maker is upgraded to buy from hold at Berenberg, which considers the shares inexpensive despite stretched multiples. Atrium European real estate shares rise as much as 7.6% to the highest since March 2020 after controlling shareholder Gazette Globe raises the offer price to Euro 363 per Atrium share from Euro 335. Aside from that, checking ahead to the old snapshot, S&P 500 futures down 0.2% to 44.51 and change. Stocks Europe 600 down 1.6% to 467.76. Nikkei down 0.1% to 29.025.46. Shanghai Composite down 0.1%, 35.68 and change. Brent futures up 0.9% to 85.65 a barrel. Gold spot down 0.3% to 1762.70 per ounce. US dollar index up 0.17% to 94.10. And yeah, that looks to be about it. So, euro down was also 0.1% to 1.1586. Aside from that, some overnight news out of Bloomberg. Germany's prospective ruling coalition is targeting about 500 billion euros, or about 580 billion US, in spending over the coming decade to address climate change and will seek loopholes in constitutional debt rules to raise the financing. The ECB is exploring raising its limit on purchases of debt issued by international bodies such as the European Union from the current cap of 10%, the Financial Times reported, citing 4 ECB Governing Council members. The ECB should keep some of the flexibility embedded in its pandemic bond buying program for post-crisis stimulus measures, Governing Council member Ignacio Visco said. People's Bank of China Governor Yi Gang said authorities can contain risks posed to the Chinese economy and financial system from the struggles of China Evergrande Group. Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that one. Out of news squawk and back over to Asia, Tesla shares roaring back, set for a 50% gain from March lows. Kushida is offering to Japan war shrine angers neighbors. Baidu jumps as China said to weigh more access to WeChat content. And AirAsia X proposes paying creditors 0.5% of $8 billion owed. Back over to Europe. Traders ramp up UK rate hike bets on Bailey inflation warning. Nordea Equity Research hires Pareto analyst for tech team. ECB's Visco says flexible policy should remain part of toolkit. And Scholz coalition eyes 580 billion in spending on German reboot. And of course, over to the old event calendar today, 9:15 a.m. September industrial production month-over-month estimate of 0.2, prior is a 0.4%. Capacity utilization estimate is a 76.5% versus the 76.4. Manufacturing SIC production estimate 0.1, prior is a 0.2. 10 a.m. October NAHB housing market index estimate of 75 versus the 76 prior. 2:15 p.m. we got Fed's Kashkari discusses improving financial inclusion. And 4 p.m. today, August total net TIC flows prior was 126 billion. So there's the quick and dirty rundown of that for this morning. Now back over to China. As I mentioned, flooding in West China is destroying ag production. This out of the Epoch Times dating back to Friday late. Says continuous rainfall for more than 10 days has caused the lower reaches of the Luo River in China's west to spill their banks. Large volumes of floodwater released from upstream have destroyed 2 dams in one county, and villages are flooded. Local jujube growers and those in animal husbandry have suffered serious losses. The autumn harvest is at a severe loss in Delhi County of Huinan City, Shaanxi Province, where 108 villages have been affected by floods. According to local media reports, Delhi County has experienced heavier rains this fall. Water levels in the Hui River and Luo River running across the province have exceeded their warning levels, with some areas experiencing serious floods. In Delhi's Jiaodu town, about 29,000 acres of farmland were flooded, and 25,126 people had to be urgently evacuated. As to the reason for the flooding, some locals have voiced suspicion that it's caused by the local authorities' intentional release of floodwaters to protect other areas. Jin Meng, alias a villager in Jinzi village, Jiadao town, told the Chinese language Epoch Times that he believes that in order to protect Gansu province and Henan province, the authorities quickly released a large volume of water into the Delhi area, bursting local river banks. The village was completely submerged, about 2 meters, 6.6 feet deep, and the houses and furniture were all immersed in the water, he said. Posts on social media by other local villagers in the disaster-stricken areas across Jiadao and Delhi County also said, in order to protect Gansu province in the upper stream and Henan province in the lower stream, authorities in Shaanxi province opened their own gates for 2 flood releases. The flood passed through Delhi and the dam broke. The Epoch Times could not verify this information, but after contacting the Flood Control Command of Delhi County, and a staff member said that they did not release floodwaters at this time. At 6 a.m. on October 9th, villagers suddenly received a notice from township officials ordering them to evacuate immediately. Zhui Fei, an alias, an animal husbandry farmer in Jiadu, told the Epoch Times, "The water is rising rapidly, and the time for people to evacuate was very short. In a rush, cows and pigs were killed by the flood, and the farmers have suffered particularly great losses." Delhi County is known for its jujube plantations that has been recognized by the central authorities for its high-quality ag products, like the famous Delhi jujube. Most local villagers grow jujube to support their livelihoods. It's harvest season now, but the floods have ruined this year's crop. Delhi County's winter jujube is the most delicious in the country and has the most output, Jin said. The winter jujube in the field is almost completely submerged, and the greenhouses are also completely submerged. Jin's 5-acre plantation of jujube trees was all destroyed after being soaked in floodwater. Epoch Times has obtained a video showing the flooding in Delhi County.
对，这边是到新市村骑的那条路，现在
Yeah, so the floodwaters look pretty good over there. I think we're used to kind of seeing that here in the Midwest, and God knows we've seen plenty of that over the course of last several months all around the world at this point. So that being said, let's flash over to another one here. Aluminum shortages next as magnesium supply dries up. So last week talked a little bit about zinc. We've talked about a lot of coal and everything else. Well, appears that aluminum is next on the docket here. So this week, the largest U.S. producer of aluminum billet used to make automobiles and building supplies told customers and business associates that output capacity might be curtailed in 2022 due to a lack of magnesium supply. In the last several weeks, magnesium availability has dried up, and we have not been able to purchase our required magnesium units for all of 2022, Metalco Inc. President Tom Horder said in the letter obtained by S&P Global Platts. Difficult to source supplies of raw materials and soaring energy prices are adding to the headwinds, Horder said in the letter. The purpose of this note is to provide this advanced warning that, if the scarcity continues, and especially if it becomes worse, Metalco may need to curtail production in 2022, resulting in allocations to our customers, he said. Horder said his company will source as much magnesium as possible and other raw materials, such as silicon, to maintain its planned production output for 2022. The warning comes, he told customers they should have contingency plans if supplies tighten. Aluminum billet cannot be produced without magnesium, which is a strengthening agent and allows it to be strong enough to be used in structural applications such as automobile frames, engine blocks, and body panels. I will provide an update in a couple weeks, Horder said. In the meantime, you may want to consider letting your customer base know of the silicon and magnesium availability crisis, and also let them know that other products or inputs needed for making billet or slab may also reach a crisis point. Horder added that other challenges such as the cost of energy, labor, and shipping are increasingly mounting. Alcoa is another major U.S. aluminum producer that also warned about shortages of magnesium and silicon. Without these two ingredients, both manufacturers cannot produce aluminum billet products. A reduction in U.S. output would tighten global supply even further. The macro backdrop of the aluminum industry is a complicated one. First, a military coup in Guinea last month stoked concerns over the supply of bauxite, a sedimentary rock with high aluminum content. Then, the closure of energy intensive smelters in Asia and Europe have tightened global supplies and forced LME prices to record highs. And of course, there we see that pushed up above, 3098 and change, I suppose. I don't know what its measure is, if that's in billet or ton or whatever that is. The latest surge in industrial metals will continue to put pressure inflation higher. So, obviously, on an uphill trend. So much for the Federal Reserve's transitory narrative. Higher costs will push up prices for new cars and other products made of aluminum. So, yeah, story remains the same, right? Aside from that, obviously, COVID here still in the news. Is it a pandemic? No. Is it a scamdemic? Probably pandemic. Nonetheless, it's had quite an effect on the working poor. They're still using food banks as millions had their savings wiped out during COVID. 18 months since the virus pandemic began, hunger and food insecurity continued to plague millions of households across the country. Some of these folks have had their life savings drained with no financial safety net for the next crisis. Compound food insecurity and deterioration of financial conditions of households, and it appears the working poor have barely recovered from the pandemic downturn. What's likely to happen is the Biden administration will continue handing out free money to these folks to prevent social upheaval. An example of this was when Biden increased SNAP allowances by a quarter a few months ago. First, let's talk about food banks in their current state. Katie Fitzgerald, COO of Feeding America, a nonprofit org that oversees a nationwide network of 200 food banks feeding more than 46 million people, told AP News that despite the decreasing numbers of households reliant on food banks, today's numbers remain 55% above pre pandemic levels. We're worried food insecurity could increase all over again if too many shoes drop, she said. The next is a new NPR poll that finds almost 20% of U.S. households had their savings wiped out during the pandemic. The share of respondents who made $50,000 or less was about 30%. Evan L. Joseph, a vice president at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, said many used their savings to cover basic expenses and survive as tens of millions were laid off during the pandemic. When crisis hits, or anything goes out of the norm, your child is sick, for example, you are sacrificing wages, she said. About 66% of households earning $50,000 or less had difficulty paying rent, feeding their family, and covering medical bills. Countless times we have described the disparity between the people who hold assets and those who don't. The gap in wealth inequality surged even wider, already at emergency levels before the pandemic, after the Federal Reserve pumped trillions of dollars in liquidity into financial markets to boost asset prices higher, such as stocks, bonds, homes, art, classic cars, wine, and crypto. Those who own nothing were the worst off. And up here, of course, we see the top 1% in red, obviously crossing over the blue line here of the middle 60%, which is the 20 to 80% income bracket. And that, of course, is spread from 1989, it appears, all the way to present. It says the age-old question for the Biden administration: how will they elevate those stuck in poverty? Keep handing out free money and disincentivizing people not to work? Yeah, you can't exactly get from point A to B on only $300 off of Nancy Antoinette's scraps off her table now, can you? Nope, not really. And one might question, we don't have the ability to do like what Congress does, go in and make a salary and then come out a millionaire on a $170,000 salary. Scratch your head on that one, right? Aside from that, U.S. coal roars back under Biden, unlike Trump. And of course, if you paid attention over the last several weeks of talking of the energy crisis and that spilling out across the globe, obviously ESGs and the greenification of everything, at the flip of a switch, coal certainly got vilified, but apparently it's now making a comeback. I don't know. Says one of the biggest ironies to start this decade is a transition from fossil fuel generation to green energy has created a global energy crisis that is forcing the U.S., among many other countries, to restart coal-fired power plants monumentally ahead of the winter season in the northern hemisphere to prevent electricity shortages. The virtue-signaling assault by the Green Lobby, spearheaded by hapless puppet Greta Thunberg, must beside herself as U.S. power plants are on course to burn 23% more coal this year, the first increase since 2013, despite President Biden's ambitious plan for a national grid to run on 100% clean energy by 2035. A global energy crunch is rippling through the world amid a huge rebound for power. Natural gas has soared to record highs as supplies remain tight, and countries are finding out that renewable energy sources aren't as reliable as previously thought. This has created a massive worldwide scramble by power companies for fossil fuels, especially coal. Yeah, that dirty black stuff. U.S. utilities are transitioning to coal because soaring natural gas prices make it uneconomic to produce electricity. At the moment, 25% of all U.S. electricity produced is derived from coal-fired plants, up 10 percentage points since the beginning of COVID. Interesting. The markets have spoken, Rich Nolan, the National Mining Association Chief Executive Officer, told Bloomberg. We're seeing the essential nature of coal come roaring back. The Energy Information Administration forecasts U.S. utilities are estimated to burn 536.9 million short tons of thermal coal, up from 436.5 million in 2020. And here we see the trend upward. U.S. power plants burn more fossil fuel this year, and I'm sure AOC and everybody else's heads exploded. Ernie Thrasher, CEO of Xcoal Energy and Resources, the largest U.S. exporter of fuel, said demand for coal will remain robust well into 2022. Last week, he warned about domestic supply constraints and power companies already discussing possible grid blackouts this winter. He said they don't see where the fuel is coming from to meet demand, adding that 23% of utilities are switching away from gas this fall and winter to burn more coal. There are not enough coal miners to rapidly increase mining output. And of course, we've talked about that. The fact that coal mining is way down. Obviously, if you're in West Virginia, Virginia area where there's plenty of coal mines, Kentucky, under 44, there were so many regs put in place to basically try and bankrupt them, and many did go bust, that it was not conducive to continue to pump people into the old mines and take that up as a career. Perhaps now is a time that is going to change. I don't know. But Kevin Book, Managing Director of Research from Clearview Energy Partners, said the decarbonization communication from Western governments would undoubtedly be challenged due to the energy crisis it has sparked. The goal of policy, if you listen to what's being said in Western countries in the context of climate discussions, is not only to stop building new coal, but to eliminate the existing capacity to burn coal, Book said. This is a moment in time when that idea is going to be challenged. One thing Greta and the wealthy elite that likely fund her campaign to re-educate younger generations into believing the green energy transition will be seamless is that it won't and may take decades. A pure-play coal company that is already benefiting from the demand surge and rising prices is Peabody Energy Corporation. As cooler weather fast approaches, the company may see increased demand for its thermal coal the utility companies use to produce electricity. On a technical basis, a so-called bullish golden cross was just triggered. And here we see there it crossed back in 2019 when, let's see, the light blue is, tough to see that. I can't tell. Magenta. Yeah, either way, it's kind of highlighting that there. Make coal great again. Former President Trump used to tell crowds a few years back at rallies in West Virginia. We're sure it's boom times in the Appalachia Hills. So, yes. And by the way, just for those paying attention, the UN COP26 that just recently took place, them driving their fancy little Teslas, well, guess what? They had to bring in diesel generators just to be able to power them so that they could charge their batteries. Foolishness. Absolute foolishness. Over to the housing related stuff. Says, has the housing bubble peaked? Zillow pauses robo flipping due to snags. So perhaps maybe we're starting to see a peak, as it were, in housing at the moment. In recent weeks, we had heard several anecdotal reports that Zillow's electronic house flipping service was underperforming, buying houses at overinflated prices and then flipping them for a loss, even when factoring in fees and commissions. Dr. Money Matters says $35,000 marked down for this one. Interesting that even before price reduction, first price was only $3,000 more than the listed purchase price. What's the point? And another guy says Zillow is charging handsome service fees and commissions that are not reflected in the listed sale price. They still make several percent, even if they buy and sell at a nominal loss. That notwithstanding, they are surely catching the knife on some of these properties. And another guy says, looking ahead, Zillow seems to be selling some houses now lower than they bought them at loss. Yeah, it doesn't seem to make good economic sense. Zillow bought my parents' old house in 2019 and ended up taking a loss because they did minor renovations after, but ended up selling it for less than what Zillow paid them. My parents skated away with that check so fast. Yeah. It says it appears there's been some truth to that, because according to Bloomberg, Zillow, which acquired more than 3,800 homes in the second quarter, will stop pursuing new home purchases as it works through a backlog of properties already in its pipeline. Zillow Group Inc. is taking a break from buying U.S. homes after the online real estate giant's pivot into tech-powered house flipping hit a snag. While Zillow is best known for publishing real estate listings online and calculating estimated home values, called Zestimates, that let users keep track of how their home is worth, with the traffic on the company's apps and website serving as the main source of profits in Zillow's online marketing business. More recently, it has been buying and selling thousands of U.S. homes. In 2018, the company launched Zillow Offers, joining a small group of tech-enabled home flippers such as Open Door, known as iBuyers. In the new business, Zillow invites homeowners to request an offer on their house and uses algos to generate a price. If an owner accepts, Zillow buys a property, makes light repairs, and puts it back on the market. While the service was firing on all cylinders in the aftermath of the COVID crisis, when home prices tumbled only to shoot back up to all-time highs, rising at a record 20% year-over-year pace, in recent months it has found flipping to be far more challenging, as the pace of flips has slowed drastically in a housing market where most of the first-time buyers now find themselves priced out. And of course, the Case-Shiller 20-City Composite Home Price Index shows, it's going through the roof to levels not seen since, probably about 2004, 5, 6 time frame. However, instead of admitting that we may be nearing or already have passed the peak of yet another housing bubble, Zillow has instead blamed operational capacity and being short-staffed to meet the pace of transactions. So bottom line, looks like they're getting out of it. Yeah, you can probably still use their service. They're probably still making money at the end of the day. But seems that house flipping and that for now, not so much. So aside from that, back to coal. These countries are the most reliant on coal. So despite all the talk of greenification of everything and, these $3.5 trillion packages they want to do for infrastructure and, we'll see how well wind and solar pans out. Just ask Texas beginning part of this year. But coal still on the march. Coal shortages are currently causing electricity supply problems in two major coal-using economies, India and China. Yeah, I like that picture right there because it pretty well depicts exactly what just took place at the UN COP meeting, albeit it wasn't coal. They probably just had a Cat diesel or Cummins diesel or whatever sitting there charging the stupid Tesla. Ridiculous. Says as Statista's Katharina Buchholz notes, shortages are happening because economic activity is picking up, as coronavirus numbers have remained stable in most countries, while at the same time coal production is sinking due to weather problems and environmental concerns driving investment decisions. According to Ember, India still produces 70% of its electricity from coal, the sixth highest share in the world. China, which has been touting its forays into renewable energy, is also still heavily banking on coal, at almost 61% of electricity created by the fossil fuel. Both countries are currently investing in several energy technologies, nuclear, coal, and renewables, as their economies are expanding rapidly. And here we see the countries most reliant on coal. Botswana coming in at almost 100%, Kosovo about 95-ish%, Mongolia, South Africa, Moldova, India right there in the mix at about 70%, Serbia, Poland, Kazakhstan, Bosnia and Herzegovina, China down at about 60%, and Indonesia at about 59.7%. Says according to the data, Botswana was the country most reliant on coal in the world. The southern African country uses coal for electricity generation almost exclusively, while small Balkan Republic Kosovo registers 95% coal use for its electricity production. Countries in Eastern and Southeastern Europe feature heavily among the top 10 of countries dependent on coal, while Mongolia and South Africa are other notables of global coal dependency. So there you have it. Bottom line, it looks like coal is going to be around for quite a while. I sincerely doubt, and as we've covered many a times before in recent broadcasts and weeks past, this greenification of everything is going to take a lot longer than people expect. Unless, of course, they're going to put up with folks complaining that, hey, we got rolling blackouts in the middle of winter, or when it's extremely hot, can't have AC, things of that nature. What are they going to do? I think the appropriate thing to do is throw the bums out of office, and that will likely happen. So, aside from that, switching gears, let's go Brandon, the new viral meme taking the internet by storm out of Insider Paper here. I'm sure many of you guys have probably seen this. says mistakes are a part of our lives and can happen at any time, whether at home or at work. Most of them you can just look past, laugh, and move on. But when you are a public figure and anything you say has the potential to go viral, even tiny mistakes can spread over the far reaches of the internet. And that is exactly what happened with Let's Go Brandon. During an interview that took place in October 21 with a NASCAR driver, Brandon Brown, politics became a part of the high octane sports, and the futile attempt made by the NBC interviewer to control the damages made the moment iconic. Let's go, Brandon. What does it mean? Supporters of former President Donald Trump and everyone present at the NASCAR event made chants against President Joe Biden, and here's what happened. And the crowd during the interview with Brandon Brown after his sensational performance in NASCAR Xfinity Series, where Brandon secured the win, started making use of the unsavory chant F Joe Biden. The interviewer, Kelly Stevas, tried to control the scene with a rather pitiable attempt by claiming the crowd was chanting something else, aka gaslighting. Don't believe your lying ears, folks. Kelly, in her attempt to keep things maybe professional, claimed that the crowd was chanting, "Let's go, Brandon." Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, Kelly said, and when the camera moved towards the audience, they were originally chanting F Joe Biden. And it's not like you can't hear it, it's plain as day. After the event of Brandon and NBC reporter, the next internet viral sensation came into existence. Neither Kelly nor Brandon has responded to the meme as of now, and it is still unclear if they actually misheard the crowd or were trying to cover up the incident. And here's what played out.
Thank you to all of our partners. Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of hang back those first two stages and just watch and learn. What did you learn that helped you there in those closing laps?
Oh my God, it was learning how each line didn't stay to one. Everything shifted top to bottom so much.
So there you have it. Yeah, sounds exactly like what they're saying. Let's go, Brandon. That's what they're saying. The phrase "Let's go, Brandon" has acquired a new meaning as protesters have found a way to take their anger on media without repercussions from authorities. The phrase has gained so much popularity over such a small period of time that even Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican from Texas, jumped on it, and in an interview on Thursday with podcaster Benny Johnson said, "It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen." The clip is surreal, Mr. Cruz said, listening to Kelly say, "Look, they're chanting, 'Let's go, Brandon.' It captures everything about fake news all at once."
Biden can't go to blue states now without there being armies of conservatives, freedom lovers, Trump supporters standing there saying, "Get out of our state." You saw this in Michigan. You saw this in New Jersey. They're saying, "Let's go,
Benny,
Brandon."
I'm sorry, I've got to fact check you. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, "Let's go, Brandon." There are a lot of NASCAR fans, and just Biden brings that out. That is the sentiment that bursts to the top.
Let's go, Brandon. You saw that. Did you see the clip?
I saw it, and it truly is stunning. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So yesterday, or 2 days ago, I tweeted out a picture of Wheel of Fortune with F space CK JOE B space DEN, and I said, I'd like to solve the puzzle. It's "Let's go, Brandon." So you know who's mad? My dad is pissed at me, and I love my dad. My dad's a pastor, and he's mad that I tweeted it, and he's got a point. But it was too damn funny. I actually agonized for a minute because I didn't necessarily like amplifying the profanity, but the clip is surreal. Like listening to the NBC reporter say, "Look, they're chanting 'Let's go, Brandon.'" It captures everything about fake news all at once.
That it does. Well said, Mr. Cruz. Aside from that, this morning, round things out, breaking: Colin Powell, first black Secretary of State, dead at 84 of COVID-19 complications. Military leader served in a number of Republican administrations over the last half century. This out of Just the News this morning. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell died Monday morning due to complications from COVID-19, according to his family. He was 84. Powell was the first black U.S. Secretary of State serving in the second Bush administration from 2001 to 2005. From 1989 to 93, he served as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the presidency of George H.W. Bush. He was fully vaccinated, the family said. General Colin L. Powell, former U.S. Secretary of State and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, passed away this morning due to complications from COVID-19, the Powell family statement reads. We want to thank the medical staff at Walter Reed National Medical Center for their caring treatment. We have lost a remarkable and loving husband, father, grandfather, and a great American. Powell was born to Jamaican parents in Harlem and grew up in the South Bronx. He graduated from City College of New York and joined the military through ROTC. He then completed 2 decorated combat tours with the newly desegregated Army in Vietnam before heading to D.C. In addition to serving the Bushes, Powell became the first black national security advisor at the end of President Ronald Reagan's second term. Former President George W. Bush released a statement mourning the passing of his family's longtime advisor, writing that Powell was a great public servant, starting with his time as a soldier in Vietnam. The former president added that Powell had been such a favorite of presidents that he earned the Presidential Medal of Freedom twice. He was highly respected at home and abroad, and most important, Colin was a family man and friend. Following his retirement from the military, Powell was courted by both the Republican and Democratic Party to become a presidential contender for their ticket. Powell briefly considered the idea of running before deciding in 1995 that a national campaign for office was not something with which he wished to engage. In the last decade and a half, Powell's view of the Republican Party shifted dramatically, evidenced first when he endorsed then-candidate Barack Obama during the final weeks of lead-up prior to the 2008 election. Since then, Powell endorsed Democrat candidates for the Oval Office over Republicans. Following the January 6 Capitol breach this year, Powell stated publicly that he no longer considered himself to be a Republican. So there you have it. Old Colin Powell apparently succumbed to COVID, whether it be the jab, whether it be the thing itself, who knows. But interesting that they had to put that in there and say that he was absolutely fully vaccinated on top of that. So aside from that on the morning, well, playing off of the old FJB, yours truly here decided, hey, what the heck, I might as well throw a shirt together, and I decided to put together a Teespring. So if by chance you feel compelled, I have put a shirt together. It's called Let's Go Brandon. Got the old insignia on there. And of course I put the old hashtag FJB on there. I get it in a couple, 2, 3 colors there. Black, white, gray, what have you. But if you feel like supporting the channel, if it, suits your fancy, certainly appreciate it. Keep the old lights on here. And of course those that noticed that I was not on YouTube for the last week, well, the backup plan would be that if that happens again, I'll just shove on over to Rumble. But with that, there is a cost. So eventually I do want to try and fray some of those costs. It'll cost me about $25 a month to be able to stream over to said platform. And so I thought, yeah, what the heck, we'll throw something together. So I'll drop the link out in chat if you guys are interested, and I'll probably put together something a little bit more formal by way of a advertisement that I can play here during shows, but figured I'd throw that out there. In any case, that is going to do it for the broadcast here this morning. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always, and yeah, we'll have to see if I get a chance to do this this afternoon. Got a few things going on, so I may just forgo this afternoon and just do mornings this week. But aside from that, be sure and get on all the platforms, over to DLive, over to Twitch, over to all the platforms, Rumble, get over to YouTube, and of course, Gab TV. All the archives and that are there. By the way, the one that got me taken down this time was episode 101, talking about immunity part 2, and who knows what they didn't like this time around. Still may challenge it and cite an article that I just come across last week about something very similar taking place in Germany over recent weeks. Same thing happened, took it to court, and the people won. So stay tuned. All right, like I said, that's going to do it for now, and we'll see you back later. Take care. God bless everybody.